Right, I'm waiting for parts and things to come, new oil pressure switch and so on. So in the interim, I thought I'd check the torque on the cylinder head and adjust the tappets to begin with, and I've just mended the horn, but we'll come to that in a minute. So I'm going to retorque the head nuts. The order for tightening is in the manual. Basically, it's like an X in the middle, across like an X, and then outer, fully outer. So basically, they're much the same generally. They tend to be. You start in the middle. Generally, do like an X in the middle, then the first two out, then the two out on the other side, then the final out on this side, and the final out on that side. I'm going to torque mine up to 20 pounds per foot. Foot pounds is it? I always get it wrong way around. The manual says 18. I'm not recommending this, but I use 20 because I've got a composite gasket, and I always think they just add a little bit of extra crush, so I use 20. But I'm not saying I'm recommending that. Don't please don't write in. I'm just saying that's what I do. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the socket on all the cylinder head studs, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back them off like a quarter of a turn, and for the simple reason that when you're torquing, the studs, they can like seize or lock in their threads, and then you'll get a false, it will say that it's tight when actually it's just locked, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to back off all the nuts just by a quarter of a turn, just to so that any sort of seal is broken, so that when I do torque them up, I know I'm getting an accurate torque setting. Because of course, if a stud is locked solid, let's say it's rusted solid, you can torque it, to whatever you want. But if it's rusted solid, then it might not be tight at all. So you want to make sure you've got a nice run on all the nuts when you're torquing up. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go around, just sort of break the seal, as it were, on all the studs, and then I'll come back and we'll torque them up to 20. Right, I've backed off all the nuts just by a tad, just to break the seal. Just a couple of things to note is I use a long socket where possible. You need one because this is the earth stud, and obviously you need a long socket to get over that thread. Okay. On the other hand, I've also got a short standard socket, and I use that for this particular nut here, stud there, because otherwise, you can't get the if you use a normal extension, it interferes with the frame. So for all the others, I use the long socket rather, but for this one I use that with the socket on top, and it just fits under the frame with the torque wrench on top, so it just gets under the frame, so I can do that one because it's so in line. I don't know why I seem to get away with the rear one. I might try the rear one as well, but certainly that one you need the short socket on. Okay, we'll torque them up now. Okay, torque wrench set to 20 pounds foot. Trying to see if you can see this or not, but probably not. Okay, but I think you can see me getting the torque wrench on the first stud over here, centre stud on the inlet. There we go. And what you do is just tighten up the torque wrench until it clicks. Yeah, so it's a way off. It's a way off. It wants quite a bit, so I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to do it all the way up to 20, because I want it quite a bit. So I'm guessing that the others are probably the same, that they want quite a bit as well. I've lost the stud. I've lost the other small socket now. There it is. Yeah, that's taken quite a bit as well. It's amazing. Just that initial startup, it really, especially on these composite gaskets, I find it really, it really, sorry, I was checking my, it really loosens things up. It's amazing. Just that initial startup. And that's why I'm going to use that short socket on the, can I get it under the frame? I think so. I'm not sure if I can get the torque wrench under the frame. I think that's why, no I can't, that's why I've not used it there before. But I will use a short socket on the extension, because otherwise the side of the socket hits the frame and puts it even further out of line. Right, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I'll go back to the long socket now. A, it goes over that, and B, it's a proper socket with a hex, whereas this is a star socket. Like, they're okay, but obviously you don't have quite the same grip as you do on a hex socket. I'm not doing these up to torque, but because they're quite a long way off all of them, so I'm just giving them an initial tighten. You'll know when it's up to torque because the torque wrench will crack, will click, and I can feel it's nowhere near clicking at the moment. These outer ones feel a bit better, a bit tighter. Right, I'll go around it all again now, and maybe we'll go up to torque. I don't know, depends how. If it still doesn't click, well, it's still a way off. So I'm still going to do the. I'm still going to do them in increments. I don't want to, go straight from where they are now to 20. That wouldn't be good. I'll tighten the head down progressively. It might be that one or two of these will go and click, but I'm not sure. I'm still going. None of them's clicked yet. That one's there, that one's gone, that one's clicked. I can tell that one was close to going. I think these end ones are close. I'm only going to give them a little bit. I don't want them to go before the middle, really. Right, I'll go for a full torque now, so they should all click. There we go. Just check it a few times. That's the first one. Second one. That's up to torque. Third one. There we go. We think that fourth one's already on to torque, but I'll check it because as you tighten other ones down, it can loosen others, if you know what I mean. Now the others are all tighter. Yeah, it's just taken a mini turn that. More than that. There we go. Always, and of course when we have finished doing them all, I'll go back and we'll check them all. As I say, as you tighten, the more you tighten the head down, then you know obviously it can slacken ones off that are already tight. There we go. Go, and then right on the 4 outers, and I don't think they're going to take that much. There's a bit there. Gone. That one's gone. Last two. And the last one. Done. We're all torqued up, so as I say, they took I'd say they were down for at least £4, I'd say. As a guess, I don't know. It's amazing how much they torqued up. Right, I'm just going to go around and just double check them. Immediately, that one just took a mini half turn to tighten. And there we go, all fully torqued down. And as I say, that's why I torque them down. Well, I use a composite head gasket, and I do find it's amazing that first start up, it loosens everything. I mean, I'd say they were down a good £4 foot, whatever it is. So yeah, so immediate, and then they should be okay. Now about 100 miles or so, torque it down again, and that should be it then. Obviously every so often, every service or whatever, every few thousand miles, I'll check them, and you keep your eye on them. But do it now. About 100 miles should be fine after that. Okay, and next thing we'll do, and I'll also check these 7/16 studs. I'll retighten those. They're not head studs, they just go, they don't tighten the cylinder head up, but they do tighten up the rocker boxes. So I'll just retighten those as well. And then we'll take off the the rocker box inspection covers, and then we'll redo all the tappets. As part of that on the T160, what I've done is I've loosened off the oil cooler, because the problem on the T160 is because I'm probably a Rocket 3, but I've never done one, so I don't know. But the obviously the cylinders are tilted forward, so that gives you fantastic access to the inlet tappets, but the oil cooler is right in the way for the exhaust tappet. So what I might even do is I might just undo the hoses and just get the cooler out of the way completely, because it's so much easier. That is the trouble with the T160, is doing the exhaust tappets with the cooler. It's always in the way. Right, ready to do the tappets now. So I've already retorqued the cylinder head studs, and I've checked the tightness and tightened up the two studs on either end of the rocker box on both, and then I've also retightened the 3 Allen keys on the front lip just to make sure everything's tight, ready for the to check the adjustment. Then I've turned the engine over very carefully in my case, because I have indeed removed the oil cooler, because it just makes access so much easier. It's my dear old mum saying, lazy people take the most trouble. In other words, I could not have bothered to have removed the oil cooler because it's too much trouble. But in fact, I would then make more work for myself trying to work around the oil cooler and everything getting in the way. So in the long run, it's easier to remove the oil cooler and do the job that way. Lazy people take the most trouble. Yes, Mum. Then I've got my 8th thou feeler gauge, which in my case is bent slightly at the end so I can get things under. And I put it in between the bottom of the tappet and the top of the valve. And sure enough, it's very, very tight. I can't even get it in there. So that's a mixture of things, the valve perhaps seating more fully when the engine started, and also of course tightening the head down again with the composite gasket. It's just going to compress things that bit more. So I need to, I've turned the engine over, yeah, to make sure that this is definitely on the sort of relaxed. It's definitely not open, that valve. 1/2 inch, loosen the lock nut, and then with a screwdriver adjust the actual height, the gap. Put my 8th thou back in, and I just want it so it's, yeah, it slides quite nicely. Now there's some debate over whether you should set your tappets 6th thou inlet and 8th thou exhaust, or 8th thou inlet and 10th thou exhaust. So 6 and 8 smaller gap, or 8 and 10 bigger gap. Now the manuals both say 6 and 8, so that's the Haynes and the Triumph workshop manual. That looks good. Now it's my understanding, I might be wrong, that you use a bigger gap for racing, for the simple reason that the engines are being thrashed and the chances of the valve closing up therefore much higher, so that the engines get so hot. That's my understanding. So I tend to set mine at 6 and 8, not at 8 and 10. But there's some debate over that, so as you wish. Personally, 6 and 8. As long as I perhaps err on the side of looseness rather than tightness on my 6 and 8. That's a nice sliding fit there. Okay, you can feel that tappet now going up and down nicely. Rocker rather, tappet to the bottom. But this is a tappet adjuster, which adjusts the tappet gap at the bottom. Okay, yeah. So that's what I'll do, and I'll just turn the engine over very slowly and gently, because of course I've got the oil cooler removed, and I'll repeat that with those 3, and then I'll do the inlets and so on. But certainly needs doing, especially with the composite gasket, because everything's changed quite a bit since we first built the engine after the initial startup and after the torquing down. Okay, so setting those to 8 thou, and setting the inlets to 6,000. So I'm going to carry on doing that. Turn the engine over very slowly and gently by hand, making sure that our next valve it's fully closed before setting the adjustment. Then when everything's done, I'll go the engine over one full time, checking each one to double check that the gap is still there. Okay, I'll go off camera while I do that because I'm just doing the same procedure time and time again. Okay. Oh yeah, it's a bit of oil. You get a bit of oil coming out of the rocker box cover here, because obviously the engine's tilted forward, so the oil tends to sit on that edge. So what I do is when I take the cover off, I just immediately tilt it down to there, and the oil runs out and goes into the cover cleverly. yeah. And then when most of the oil's gone, then you pull the cover out, so you don't have a huge amount of oil pouring down over the engine. Just a little thing. There's virtually no oil comes out of the inlet because obviously it's the engine's slanting that way. Okay, let's carry on with that a bit. Right, there we go then. Tappet's all done. 8 thou gap on the exhaust, 6 thou gap on the inlet. The main thing is that to bear in mind is the eternal problem of you set them and then when you tighten the lock nut up, they move. That's the eternal problem. Now these particular adjusters have got slots in for a flat blade screwdriver. The originals had that horrible little square nut on the top, which I loathe. The ones that I like best, they've got an Allen key. The advantage of that is you can hold the Allen key dead firm while you tighten the nut up, and it's not going to move at all. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just you sometimes have to set these about 6 times, because every time you tighten them up, and then you check afterwards, it's always tightened up, and so it's a bit of a pain. But that's the main thing, to make sure that when you tighten the lock nut up, it doesn't move, and to double check the gap afterwards. Then I've turned them all over once, given the whole engine a turn over once, but obviously I didn't really want oil coming out of the oil pipes, but it's fine. Just to check and everything's okay. So I'm going to put the inspection covers back on now, followed by the oil cooler. And what I think I'm going to do with the inspection caps, they've got the inspection covers, they've got the gaskets are well sealed on one side. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this side on with grease. I'm going to put grease on these faces rather than well seal, because they'll need taken off again, these covers, after 100 miles, just to to check the tappets or every service, and of course if they're glued to the faces, then it makes life harder. I mean, what you can do, of course, is just heat up the faces with a heat gun, because well sealed will thin, becomes liquid again when it gets warm. So you can just run a blowtorch over there and then take them off that way. But I think it's just easier, use well seal on that side, and then we use grease on this side, and then if they do leak, then take them off and well seal them. But hopefully they shouldn't leak. If they are going to leak, they leak from this exhaust edge, obviously, because the whole engine's leaning that way and all the oil just sits there. Okay, so I'm going to grease those edges up and then those faces up, and then we'll put the rocker box covers back on. And there we are, all done and back together. Oil cooler's back on and the inspection covers back on, and all done and dusted. Only thing to note is don't over tighten these two central bolts. I can't think of the word. Studs, long nuts. I forget. Anyway, don't over tighten them, because they don't tighten onto metal. There's a gap, underneath the inspection cover, and if you over tighten, you'll bend and then eventually crack the actual inspection covers themselves. So they will do it tight, but don't over tighten them. Okay, and there we go. And when we get the when we get this new oil pressure switch back, then we can start the engine again and check everything's okay, and also obviously get the exhaust back on, this time with a full proper mounting kit, which would probably help to stop the exhaust falling off again. And yeah, so engine wise we should be about there then, all good.